Hi, everybody. It's another week and another time to join us for the In-Ring Wrestling Podcast. Already episode 4 here with Kevin Kelly and Casey Thompson. Casey, of course, was fighting the wars as an enhancement talent, as the consummate underdog, as the jobber, in WCW, while I was the brand new announcer, kind of the jobber of sorts of WWF. Anyway, so Casey and I were there for the Attitude Era, and we've been talking about from the summer of June '96 on and all points in between. So we thank you very much for joining us once again. And all we ask you to do is spend about 30 minutes with us each and every week. That's all the whole podcast will take. And just like, share, and subscribe, and tell everybody that you know about us. Casey, it's been another week of growth here on the In-Ring Wrestling Podcast. The numbers have been nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's little by little. We know that it's not going to happen overnight, so it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, but we're going to keep on plugging away until we get out there. And we have a unique niche here. We're giving people true stuff that's from behind the scenes that they haven't heard or seen or anything from people that are actually there. You were in WWF or WWE. I was in WCW at the time. So we have a unique perspective that now we can share with everyone. And
Yeah.
so they can see what behind the scenes were like. But we've been talking a lot about WCW. I had a couple questions about when your time there at WWE,
Okay.
WWF. So a couple things. One is about Vince McMahon, the obsession with pronouns.
Oh,
And then my other question is for this week, if we can work it in, is about the gorilla position, how it started and
oh,
how
okay.
where it went to. Now, when you go out the gorilla position, it's like they build the gorilla position. Before, back in my day in 1991 and my first match in WWF, it was a table monitor and a headset. So, if we can work those in this week, that would be great. But I'm excited for another, episode 4, so I'm ready to go.
Yeah, a lot of people tuned in last week and relived Casey's tales of destroying, all that camera equipment around ringside. People were asking about that scene in the office when it was you and Terry Taylor and Arn Anderson and Kevin Sullivan, along with Eric Bischoff, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Jimmy Hart. It seemed like it was just everybody was there waiting to see what was going to happen to Casey. And of course, if you want to relive any of the episodes, they are available for you on YouTube and throughout social media. So I think, yeah, it's a good place to start. Let's talk about Vince McMahon, because there isn't a person, I think, on the planet that hasn't heard or perhaps hasn't formed an opinion about Vince McMahon. It seems like everybody knows what the embattled former owner, general manager, COO, whatever he was, of the uh,
Mhm.
of the company that his family founded. It seems like everybody has an opinion about Vince McMahon. I could tell you this: that Vince McMahon, that we have read about, heard about, and seen all the horrible things that he's been accused of now. That wasn't the guy that I worked with. Yeah, again, I was there from '96 until 2003, and I never saw
Wow.
any of that behavior. I know Jim Cornette has talked about it as well. He left, I think, in 2000, and didn't work, but he worked day by day, side by side with Vince McMahon, and never saw any of that behavior. Um, and again, not to say that, uh, of course, the allegations are what they are, and again, is obviously a very different man from the one that we
All
knew, but
alleged.
it's all alleged, exactly. But it's all going to come out in the court, and again, if any of it's true, it's terrible, and just the
Yeah.
idea of it is awful. But Vince has always been labeled a quirky guy. He hates sneezing. There is no sick. They're famous words, and he'd get mad at you if you sneezed. He sees it as a sign of weakness. Same with being sick. Workaholic. We always said that one day we were just going to, get word that Vince was found, dead, probably in his 90s or 100 years old, and he would have the television formats in front of him and a pencil in his hand, because that's how we always saw him. Uh,
Hmm.
but one of the other quirks about Vince is that he hates pronouns. And, again, so if I'm saying Casey Thompson is the wrestler in the ring, but I said, Well, here he is. You can see he's got a bald head and a beard, and he looks to be in really great shape. Vince would jump on and say, "Pronouns, pal." And that would be okay. Let's make sure that everybody who is watching this understands that the wrestler that I am talking about is Casey Thompson, even
He'll
though
say
it's
that
not,
through your headset.
he would say that through the headset.
Yeah.
And it would be a quick reminder to, instead of using pronouns, let's say Casey Thompson, or the 1-2-3 kid, or the $1 million man, Ted DiBiase, whoever might be involved. Let's make sure that we are branding them and not just describing them with a pronoun that you could use for anybody else. A unique point of view, and I have always maintained that. Like, he kind of drilled it into our heads as announcers, and it's something that I've been mindful for. A lot of the lessons that I've used through Ring of Honor and New Japan, and on through my whole career, were lessons that I learned from working with Vince. When we came down and did television with you with
Hmm.
MXPW, it was both Don Callis and I, and there we were sitting at ringside, and we were laughing about Vince isms that we had, because
Yeah.
Don had done some
Hmm.
commentary while he was in the WWF, and so it was funny for us, and we still laughed about it when we worked together in Japan. That the
Wow.
Vinceisms were always going to stick with us. But yeah, pronouns, pal, a big one.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, I can't see where it's wrong. I think it's a good reminder for everybody, and it kind of goes back to his language, if you will. And when I say language, I mean like the words that he created. Like, you guys weren't wrestlers, you were superstars, and
Right.
the
Perception.
sport, yeah, and the sport itself. He coined the phrase sports entertainment, and really didn't harp on that too much when I was there. It was still wrestling, but we didn't go overboard with it because we knew that Vince wasn't, you know, super keen on it. But I think again that it's just a way of branding his product to be different.
Right. Makes sense.
When you have, and again with the famous, and it depends on the company that you're in terms of the gorilla position. That was named for Gorilla Monsoon.
Yeah.
And the reason it was named for Gorilla Monsoon is that because for years after he had completed his wrestling career, and when he wasn't announcing, he was the one who was sitting at that table, looking at the monitor with the headset on and a stopwatch in his hand. And he would be the one to tell the guys to go through the curtain at television. And so
Yes.
that's how that position got labeled. So they'd always make sure there would be the table and, the monitor and the headset. It would tell the local crew, okay, this is where this position needs to be set up. And sometimes it would be right behind the curtain. Sometimes it would be inside that curtain, but before another curtain.
Yeah.
And yeah, it wasn't until later on that they came up with the big staging, and that was where you'd have to go up a flight of steps and then go out the curtain that way. But yeah, it used to just be a curtain with a table behind it,
So
and
the
they had a.
gorilla moved on top of the stage
That's right.
before we went out the entrance.
We moved Gorilla high up. They had a sign, and I don't know how long the sign had been being used, but it was just something that they did every week for TV. They would just come in and print all the signs, and it would ID each of the rooms in the areas. And
Right.
and the signs were always the same. They had Gorilla. That's all it said, Gorilla, and it had a picture of, like, the big jungle gorilla.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember when I was there, you go and you see it says catering. That's always the
yeah.
first place we looked for was the catering. And then you see Vince's office, you see makeup, you see Hulk Hogan had his own dressing room, and
Oh,
then, different, yeah, Hogan had his own dressing room, Warrior had his own dressing room. This is back in the 90s. I
right.
started there in 1991 was my first match, which ironically, um, kind of a funny story. I was riding up with two of my friends. It was a double shot. They had Pensacola, Florida, Biloxi, Mississippi double shot.
Okay.
And the first night I just went up there and just ate the catering and just hung out. The next night we're in Biloxi. Tony Garea is walking around saying, "Who can do Legion of Doom's finish? Who can do their finish? Can anyone do their finish?" And I'm like, "I can do their finish. That thing's easy." So, all right, you're working Legion of Doom tonight. I'm like, "I'm not even booked." And he said, "You are now." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "What name are you using?" I'm like, "I don't know." There was a big stigma about doing jobs on TV. You didn't want them to know your real name because it's going to hurt you and all this kind of stuff. So he said, "What's your name?" I said, "Casey Thompson." He's like, Casey, yeah. What about Mike Casey?" I said, "All right, works for me." So I became Mike Casey. And so I worked Legion of Doom. And so I'm the one who took the Doomsday. And so they're like, "Okay, when we go under you, I'm going to give you the Iggy on your calf. They're going to squeeze your calves and just go do like a calf raise and then pop up on his shoulders." And they like, "You don't have to do anything. We'll do everything from there." But how I always wanted to make it go a little bit further. So I actually pushed off his head when I was getting a clothesline, and I did one, two, and another two and a half flips and landed on my belly. And it happened to be on the sizzle reel for the promo and WrestleMania and all the big pay-per-views come up that whole entire year. So after that,
Wow.
I started doing a lot of TV with them after that.
Very
So
cool.
it was
Um, Now,
being in
okay,
the right place at the right time.
and of course, a great friend of ours, late great Rusty Brooks, was one of my memories of the open of television. That he was taking either the leg drop, I think it was the leg drop from Hogan, and
Oh
that was
yeah.
part of like the wrestling challenge or superstars or whatever the show was, all star wrestling, whatever the show was called back then in 84,
Yeah.
85. Rusty was in that. Um, and again, you don't know when your number is going to be called in those types of scenarios, right? Like, because there
Right.
would be guys when I was booking the extras, I would bring 4 to 6, and some guys wouldn't get used at all. Sometimes they wouldn't have time for any extra matches, and they
Hmm.
didn't have any spots for anybody to do anything. So really, it was just a couple of days of sitting around eating catering, and get
Yeah.
what'd you get paid, by the way, per day or per match? How did they figure that out?
WCW it was 150, and then each additional match was 75, and then they
Okay.
switched it to 150, 150 eventually, and then I finally graduated up when Kevin Sullivan's there were 500 a match.
Ooh.
Which Yeah, yeah, that was nice. WWE was 150. That's it. You're working whatever they want you to, as much as they want you to, but they paid for my hotel, my rent a car, all that stuff, which
Okay.
was I was 18 at the time. So I wasn't old enough to rent a car. So they literally had to send a voucher, which is the same as like a WWE credit card down to budget for me to rent a car.
Uh huh.
And so I got a town car, right? And then I'm like, it was really weird. Then we stayed at the Marriott with, with same floor as Savage. On back in those days, TV they paid for their hotel for them, so they always
Mm-hmm.
had a nice hotel. So, and it was weird because I heard Tony Garea telling some of the guys, other enhancement talent, we like for you guys to stay in like maybe a $40 or $50 night room and rent maybe a mid-size car. And I never got that. I had no problem. I went there multiple times, a lot. And well, it's another story. And we had a bunch of ribs pulled on me, but it was actually a brand new town car that got returned that looked like it had about 150,000 miles into the inside of it.
Oh,
Yeah, man, the key was super glued into the ignition. The heat was on high. The radio was super glued all the way up, and I didn't know what to do. And I just wrote a note. Any problems? Call Carolyn with the World Wrestling Federation, and,
ah,
and just dropped the note in the box. Dropped it
then
off after hours and everything. But
now,
yeah, so I mean, it was a it was a it was 150, but all the stuff was paid. Now
got it.
WCW was different. They paid 150, but we all rode up. and we had to pay a booking fee. So that yeah, it was
So wait a minute. You got
it
paid
is what it
150. Who'd you pay the booking fee to?
um the person who brought us up ended up becoming a ring announcer and stopped bringing guys up was David Penzer. He was friends
Oh,
with Bob Roop, and so Penzer got the van. He started in Miami, and he was work his way up the turnpike every Monday, and early morning would pick us all up, and we'd get in the van. You know, me, John Scott, Bob Cook. I mean, all the Florida guys. We, then we go through Alabama, wherever, depending where we were. You know, Ian West. All the guys. We'd all go up in there, and we paid them $25 each night a booking fee, but we had to pay for our own hotel.
oh,
Years later, come to find out, he got reimbursed and paid gas later on.
of course.
So it was kind of, but it is what it is because we're able to, you know, move one step up that ladder, ringing that ladder, trying to, at least we're on TV doing stuff, making some money,
Right.
and yeah, it's just paying your dues basically, just trying to make it in the business.
Yeah, Matt Hardy's talked about that with the Italian Stallion. That's like that's a gold
Oh,
standard.
but some of the they take he was he was really bad. He would like take all their money basically. I mean,
Oh,
oh yeah, he would some of those guys. And then when going back to WWE, I brought up WWF, I brought up guys and they actually took care of me for bringing up good talent. So they would always throw a little extra in my payoff. So
mm-hmm.
then I was going to because they paid for your gas or miles. And an old enhancement talent from Alabama, Mike Jackson, pulled me to the side once. He's like, "Hey, kid, come here." And I mean, I was literally a kid. I was 18, 19 years old, and he'd been
Mm-hmm.
in wrestling forever. I watched him when I was a kid on,
Sure.
Georgia Championship Wrestling. So he pulled me to the side. He's like, "How are you doing this?" I'm like, and so he's like, "No, no, this is what you want to do. You're gonna tell him you're gonna go off of mileage. They're going to pay you so much per mileage. You're going to tell them you're coming from here, not there, this, that." And next thing you know, I'm like walking with a pocket full of money. I'm like, whoa,
Hey.
it's just a way to basically work the system. He was, back in the old days, they were all like carnies, you know, so, they would do, whatever they can do to get to the next town. So,
Mm-hmm.
he was still using that back then. He was just showing me the best way to, and they took care of me a little extra for bringing up good talent with them and everything. So it was a fun little thing,
Yeah, that's
made a little money.
again, and generationally, of course. I was there. So after Cornette left, I got moved up into talent relations, and then one of my jobs was bringing in, the talent. And we talked about this before, to where kind of geographically, I knew my guys, and I would be able to have them kind of almost set it up a few weeks in advance as best as possible. Um, but yeah, like so I had heard like the jokes about it, like, oh, where do we pay Kevin's, do we have to pay Kevin a booking fee? Ha ha ha. And I didn't get it. I hadn't heard those stories. And
Well,
then it's like, oh, I could have been making all this money.
now you want
That's kind
you
of
want to
that's kind
fast
of scummy.
you want to fast forward a few years now.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I'll put it like this. Fast forward a few years. Penzer is now the ring announcer and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, the different guys bringing guys up, and I met at the hotel with Kevin Sullivan, Paul Orndorff, Jimmy Hart, and Kevin introduced me to them and said, um, and Terry Taylor, he says, "Hey, take care of him. Make sure he's on everything." And Terry would pick all the matches. And he told Terry, he says, "Hey, listen, he's here to work, not sit around." So I'd be literally, if we did 3 tapings a day, I'd wrestle 3 times a day. So
There you
me
go.
and Paul were talking, and Paul's like, "You're from Florida?" He's like, "You know everyone?" "Yeah." He said, you can get me guys in, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." He's like, "All right." He's like, I said, "But there's other guys that are, I'm going to get heat from." because they're charging booking fees to bring them up here. Like, what do you mean they're charging booking fees? And it became a big,
Oh.
huge thing. I'm like, yeah, it's been going on forever. You paying $25, $50 booking fee. And Paul went crazy. And he's like, that's it. You're the only person from now on that we're bringing guys up through. And he would literally text back. We had pagers then. He paged the code to know it was him. He paged his high school football jersey. I think it was number 52 or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I know to call him. He's like, I need 2 guys for the morning. And I'm like, Paul, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. Is these guys going to be wrestlers or what? How intense Paul is. We've discussed that, right? And so I
Yes.
always come through. He's like, make sure they're good. They look good. They look the part. Good Christian guys. That's what Paul would always say to me. I'm like, all right, Paul, I got you. I'd always come through, and I'm like, I said, I'm going to get heat from other guys. He's like, I'll take care of all of it. And he did. He squashed it all, and even went up further. He's like, how far up does this booking fee go? I said, I don't know. And I said, it's, and one of the behind the scene guys got fired the next day, and it
Oh,
was it was crazy. But there was no more booking fees after that.
good.
Orndorff made sure of that. He said, you guys go out there, you guys work hard, you guys deserve all the money. So I mean,
That's
he was
yeah.
he was good. He was good like that. You know.
And again, all of that underhanded, carny stuff. The business has changed, and some of us, Casey, we're the same age, same generation, and it's like, well, the business is not the same as how we used to, or it's so much different now, and sometimes oh, it's not as good. Well, that's one of the areas where it's gotten better.
Yeah.
Is it's not as shady and underhanded as it used to be. And again, we look at the way like pay changes now. I would imagine that the guys probably don't ever see cash, but we both got, we were both,
Pronouns.
getting cash handed to us at the end
Hmm.
of nights. Or I knew all the enhancement guys were getting paid with cash.
I
And
remember Arnold Scolding in '91. He
mm-hmm.
had the list with his like we spoke before. He would be sitting behind the Halliburton, and he like, what's your name? And you're always thinking about, maybe I should say someone else's name and make it a little more. And literally everyone on the roster was on the list. And I'm like, yeah, Mike Casey. He's like, okay, you want to draw? I'm like, actually, you know what? WWE never wrote a check. They always paid us right then, the
Oh,
whole
okay.
money. WCW, yeah, WCW, we would go center stage. If it was a Monday in center stage, considering they were bribing the homeless people to live, to come in there with
That's
a
right.
meal and a free T-shirt, there was no draws. Once first we were getting like $50 draws there, we were able to, but then they were like, nope, no draws. Um, but the next night is always around 200 miles somewhere in the circumference of Atlanta. We'd always be able to get a draw if we needed a draw the second night. And
Mm-hmm.
then it was always nice. I always try to get as little as possible because I like my check to be bigger. And then when I go to the bank, to cash that check, and it had Ted Turner's signature on it, it was always was a cool thing. And then be surprised at the reactions I'd get from the tellers who look at it. It said World Championship Wrestling and Ted Turner on it. And then they
Oh,
look at the dollar amount and be like, oh, okay.
yeah.
you know,
Well, I
so
didn't
this is
win.
just a
I
little
didn't get the
behind the
winner's
scenes
share of
thing.
the purse.
Yeah.
I I
This is all before direct deposit and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. We got to find out. I want to find out from how the boys are paid now, because I'm sure everybody that's contract, just direct deposit electronically shows up, and I wonder if the same
Yeah.
thing happens with extras nowadays. They still use extras. They don't, of course, do syndicated tapings anymore in WWE, but
Right.
there are, occasionally from time to time you'll see some young men and women being used who are non-contracted athletes, and you'll certainly see some security guards and extras dressed
Yeah.
up like that way. Did you have, was that one of the instructions? Because we used to tell the guys, hey, it'd be a good idea if you had like a black polo shirt and some black pants with
I
you.
was
Did you ever do that?
I was a secure. Oh yeah, I was a security guard. It was a pay-per-view yeah, it was a pay-per-view. We did Topeka, Kansas, St. Louis, Missouri. So it was St. Louis, Missouri, when Abby was wrestling, or no, I'm sorry. The pay-per-view was Cactus Jack, Mick Foley wrestling Van Hammer, and they
Okay.
ended up out in like a pole barn, and you seen some guy sitting there with a hat on, with a piece of straw out of his mouth, and it was Abby, and Abby jumps him. Missy
I
Hyatt was trying
remember
to do
that.
the interview. And the two security guys outside was me and Rip Rogers.
Ah,
Um, so we were the security guys, and so I remember Abby taking those manure shovels, those big plastic ones.
yeah.
He hit Van Hammer on the flat of the back, and it had this sting so bad. He hit him so hard. I was like, ooh, that. Ugh. And then it was cold out there. It was like, it had to be like in the 30s. And Missy was out there, and I guess they set this up. The office set this up. Dusty or someone set this up where they ended up throwing Missy into the pig straw for all the water was.
Oh,
So she
yeah.
got dunked in there in the middle of all the chaos. And then when she popped up, her top came down,
Oh,
and she was hot.
I'm
She was,
sure.
I mean, not hot herself. She was livid, shall we
Yeah.
say? I mean,
Well,
she was hot back then. I don't know about now, but
she's still,
anyhow,
oh, come on.
um,
She's wonderful. Hey, so we got just a couple of minutes left, and I had a question pop into my head. I know I've seen, and we'll continue to talk about, the treatment you received from various big names throughout the year. But one that I remember being particularly rough on enhancement guys was Abdullah the Butcher. Did you ever wrestle him?
yeah, I did. I wrestled a match with Terry Taylor. I got a great match, 8-minute match. Went out there, wrestled it. Everything was good. Um, Buff Bagwell was supposed to do a run in to set up an angle. Bagwell screwed it up, went to the back, and Dusty was the booker. Dusty's like, hey, you know what? We're gonna just redo the match again because Bagwell messed it up. I'm like, okay. So he's like, hey, I'm thinking, all right, double payday. I go
Yeah.
back out there. I'm in the ring, and as we talked about Jackie Crockett, the cameraman, because the referees didn't have IFBs then. The cameraman Jackie would have a headset, so he would relay messages back and forth. So he's like, "Hey,
Hmm.
come here, get out of the ring." I'm like, "No." He's like, "Get out of the ring." No. We're like arguing. Finally, I get out of the ring. He says, "Go to the back." I go to the back because that's happened before, where like we're talking about where they fix it in post. I've
Yeah.
had to go out there before, and they say, from Topeka, Kansas, Carl Robinson. I raise my hand and just leave and go to the back. It's the most embarrassing thing ever because they screwed up the audio or something messed up. And so they, we just go there, get our name introduced, and we leave. So I go to the back, and Dusty's like, we decided that because of kayfabe and everything, we can't have you wrestle him again. Look bad for the audience. And I'm thinking, we're at center stage. You're bribing the homeless people. you know? So he's like, just switch with the other kid. He said, don't worry. He says, you're getting paid twice. You're okay, kid. I'm like, all right, no problem. And he's like, hey, you were working Terry. Who did you have? He said, I had Abdul the Butcher. I'm like,
Oh, no.
okay. At the time, Abby was using the kendo stick and literally hitting guys like 200, 100 times with it, just killing them, demolishing
Hmm.
them with it. And I was like, this is not good. Okay.
No.
I said, so I'm in there, and I had a job guy talent where I could count the time. So we'd have a 3-minute match if it was like a squash, and that's entrance to exit, 3 minutes in and out. So you really wrestling about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Sometimes they would, after their entrance, the ref would say, take it home before the bell rang.
Sure.
So it's going to be quick. So you're making easy money, but usually in those matches, you're taking some big bumps. So Abby gets in there, he jumps me, he throws shit cans me out of the ring. I don't only get my jacket off, and I'm like, all right, you know what? If I just lay here, he has to come to me, and I'm counting in my head the time, right? Because I'm like, I got, so, and then he takes me and throws me in the ring, throws me off, hits me with the elbow, shit cans me out of the ring again. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, I'm making him come to me again. And
And
then
no
he threw me
kendo
over
stick.
the rail.
Yeah, no kendo stick thus
Yeah,
far.
that's what I'm trying to do is avoid the kendo stick.
Yes.
No. So he throws me over the rail, and so I'm counting time. I'm like, I'm counting backwards in my head as it's going on. You know, I have like a built-in clock. So I fall back over the rail, and I look up, and I'm like, oh no. There's like an old 90-year-old lady sitting ringside with a wooden crutch, and Abby seen it. And all of a
Oh
sudden,
no.
whack, right over the back of my head. The thing just exploded, and I just went down to the ground selling it, and I was like holding my head just selling, doing like, oh, just like the biggest sell job I ever done in my life, right? And Nick Patrick's like, you okay? You okay? And I'm like, oh. He's like, that's it. Ring the bell. Ring the bell. He disqualified Abdul the Butcher, so I won the match. And he's like, "Don't touch him. Get away from him. He's hurt. He's hurt." So Abby leaves. They help me to the back, and I'm selling it the whole way. And then I get to the back, and they're all looking at me. I'm like, "Hey, thanks, guys. I'll see you later. I'm gone." So I didn't
Oh
get the
my
kendo
God.
stick. I won the match. I beat him on TV, and I got a double payday. It was a trifecta win all the way around.
Everything's coming up, Casey Thompson. My goodness, that's a great way to end this week on the In Ring Wrestling Podcast. Next week, we're going to dive into some more names that Casey wrestled, because we're going to talk specifically about the reputations that some guys had of being a real jerk in the ring and rough and stiff on the enhancement guys. Was it warranted? Was it valid? Some names will surprise you about who actually was good and who actually was rotten. So, Casey, congratulations on your undefeated career against Abdullah the Butcher. And you
One and
got it.
zero.
That's right. You took that winner's check to the bank, World Championship Wrestling on it. This I beat Abdullah the Butcher to get this one. Um, so, folks, that's going to do it for this edition. It's episode 4 of the In Ring Wrestling Podcast. Remember, like, share, subscribe. For Casey Thompson, I'm Kevin Kelly, and we'll see you next week right here on the In Ring Wrestling Podcast.